This video is sponsored by Kspeed. Visit them on the web at brisbanekawasaki.com.au. Hey guys, JD here with the 2022 Kawasaki Ultra 310 LXS, and you just saw me install the Kspeed fuel rail here to accommodate our stock 11mm injectors, and today I will be installing our brand new 108mm Kspeed Supercharger Pulley. So to get the process started, and just to give you a quick overview of what's going to need to happen, first we're going to remove the catch can. That's two 10mm bolts, a couple hoses. We're going to have to disconnect the supercharger relief valve. We're going to have to disconnect the duct between the supercharger and the throttle body. We're going to have to disconnect the duct between the intercooler and the supercharger. Now, I just replaced my exhaust filter literally like a week ago. So these are new gaskets. So this, I'm going to leave this assembled, but I am going to go ahead and remove the main exhaust pipe and just take the whole thing out of the ski. I've got a new gasket that goes under the main pipe here, and disconnect this cooling line. Then we're going to have to disconnect all four engine mounts. We're going to have to slide the engine forward. That'll give us access to our supercharger pulley, and I've got a band wrench we're going to put around the pulley so that we can loosen it. Then we'll replace the pulley. We will slide the engine backward, put the new belt on, hook everything up, and we should be good to go. I estimate this will take probably an hour or more. It takes me longer when filming these things, so, you know. All right, let's get started. We're going to start with the catch can. This procedure requires technical knowledge and special tools. Please consult a qualified Kawasaki watercraft mechanic before attempting to install this component on your own. So we've got our catch can out of the way, and now we're going to remove this supercharger relief valve right here. Okay, so we're now going to remove this duct here with a 7mm socket. So the next step is we're going to get this exhaust manifold out of the ski. This is the biggest thing here. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's one more bolt underneath this cover right here. And then we have a hose clamp right there. You only need to remove the bottom. You need to loosen the bottom clamp there. There's two 4mm Allens holding this plate. We have four 12mm bolts and one 14mm bolt. Make sure to remove these all. Don't remove one and leave the others tight. Loosen them all at the same time. You don't want the head to. You don't want this to warp. And I've loosened these, and now we're going to go ahead and pull these off. And we've got this cooling line off, and then we have those two hose clamps. As I said, I'm just going to loosen the bottom one, and then there's this one temp sender right here. We're going to disconnect that, and then we're going to pull this whole thing out of the ski. So you're going to want a 7mm socket to loosen that hose clamp down there. It's loose. Then we're just going to finish pulling out these bolts here, and then we'll remove this whole assembly from the ski. So you can see we've got the supercharger relief valve out of place. We've got the exhaust manifold out of the ski. And now we're going to disconnect this main duct here, and then we'll remove the tensioner assembly here. We'll unbolt our engine mounts, and that'll allow us to slide the engine forward. So I'm flying along with this process here, but I just wanted to make sure that I include every step. So the intercooler is loose. We remove those two 14mm bolts. That helps just to get these ducts off and everything. It's 2 bolts, so not a big deal. You can see my water box is completely dry. That's how it should look when you're storing the ski. You can see this pulley looks like it was underwater. Okay, so now it's time to remove our tensioner. As I mentioned, there's a couple, I do mention this on my videos, but there's a couple ways to do this. I normally did it with just a breaker bar and then by hand, but I recently bought this $7 Kawasaki spring holder tool that makes this process a lot easier. and protects your spring. I couldn't get it before. Everyone was telling me it was back ordered, so I actually found it on eBay. Anyway, what we're going to do is attach our 19mm socket to this nut right here. We're going to compress the spring, we're going to pop that tool on, and then we will remove this whole sub bracket from the ski. It seems like more of a pain, but that actually I think makes installing the belt a little easier. So you can see we've compressed the spring there. Now I got to set this down for a sec. Actually, here, let me try to hold it with this hand. All right, so here's our spring tool that slides on just like that. Then you release the tension, and now that tool is holding the spring. Can remove our breaker bar, and now we're going to remove these 4 12mm bolts that are holding this whole sub bracket in place. So as you guys can see, I've removed the whole tensioner and the sub bracket from the ski. Usually I just remove the tensioner, but today I decided to try something different. So you can see my belt down there. When you replace the supercharger pulley, you always want to replace the belt. This belt in particular only has about 6 hours on it. I just replaced it. I do have a new OEM belt sitting here, but since they are $80 a pop, this belt looks good. It has like virtually no wear on it. So I'm going to keep that belt in place just because I just replaced it. But I suggest that if you haven't replaced your belt yet and you are installing the supercharger pulley, that you do a thorough assessment of your belt. If it's a new ski you're putting it on, obviously the belt is fine. The biggest tell is that white text on the belt. You should be able to read that text clearly, and then check the ribs of the belt for any wear or damage, any fraying. If you see any of that, since you have it apart, it makes sense just to replace it now. So we're going to go ahead, take this, set it on the bench, and now we're going to loosen the engine mount so we could move the engine forward and get that nasty looking pulley off of there. I mean, you could see that thing looks like it was underwater. It's just looks horrible, and it's causing my belt to wear because the edges are not smooth anymore. They've got corrosion, and yeah, it's just really, it should have came better designed, maybe a stainless steel pulley or something. But anyway, thanks to Kspeed, we've got a nice new pulley, and I really appreciate them doing that. And so now let's finish the installation. So the next step is to loosen all 4 motor mounts. This one right here below the supercharger, I suggest you use a 14mm gear wrench like this. It is a little bit difficult to get to, and so this makes it pretty easy. And again, you're going to need not a full-size wrench. It's going to have to be a stubby wrench. This is not a stubby wrench. It's like a shorter than normal, but the stubby one would be easier. And you can see that with the ratcheting wrench, it's actually not that difficult at all. Okay, so we've got our engine mounts all loosened, and now I've got my 2x6 piece of wood in here, and I just want to show you how easy this is. Make sure this is against the engine bracket, not the supercharger, and you can see the engine moving there. So you can see the engine mounts there. If you move the engine too far that way, it'll fall off the mounts, and then you'll kind of be screwed. Our jet pump disconnected. We have plenty of room here to work on our supercharger pulley. Our next step is to get our strap wrench. We're going to hold this pulley, and we're going to get these 6 Allen bolts disconnected. You're going to hold the supercharger pulley in place, and then you're going to use a 5mm Allen to loosen each of those 6 bolts. So we were holding our pulley with this band wrench, and I wanted to show you each of these Allens as you move them. They have a little nylon washer. Make sure not to drop those. They had red Loctite. So I'm just going through. These are all loose now. I just got to go through and pull them out of the ski. So you can see I've got a couple pieces of melamine. Basically, as I mentioned a little while ago, you could see these mounts are just at the end of where they would fall off the mounts, and then the engine, you'd have some trouble getting it back on. I have this shop crane here, so But I basically put those sheets of melamine there because you don't want to move the engine any farther back. That's pretty much as you can go before it'll fall off those mounts and create a headache for you. So our supercharger pulley has been loosened. We loosened all 6 Allens, and now it pops right off. If it doesn't pop off, you might need a mechanic's wedge or a pry bar. This is the first time I'm seeing this too, but look at all that rust in there. This is a 2022, this ski. I mean, it's just rusting away. And look at that surface there where the belt goes is all rusted, so that's causing premature wear to the belt. So you can see it's pretty dirty in there. I'm gonna go through, clean everything up, and get our new pulley in place. It's as easy as that. Anyone could do this. The hardest part really is just sliding the engine forward and making sure you don't get it off those mounts. You can see it's literally about to come off the mounts. I have it spaced. Those are like 3/4 inch pieces of melamine, just real soft so it won't damage any of the surfaces there. And yep, here's a look at your stock pulley. So I've got the new Kspeed 108mm Supercharger pulley in place. You can see I'm putting these 5mm Allens back in. I did put a little dab of thread locker on, medium strength thread locker on each of those bolts. And I'm going to go ahead and get those tightened up. I'm going to double check the torque. So now these bolts, according to the shop manual, need to be torqued to 106 inch-pounds. That's very important. Don't try to tighten these by hand. They need to be used, you need to use a torque wrench, 106 inch-pounds. I'm going to grab the torque wrench and I'll show you that now. All right, so we're set to 106 inch-pounds. See your section supercharger pulley bolts, 106 inch-pounds. All right, so I'm gonna get those torqued. So you're gonna wanna use a band wrench like this just to hold the pulley in place. And you're gonna need that while you tighten it. This pulley is all tightened and in place. So now the next step is to get the new belt in place. I gotta get a piece of wood back here just to leverage the engine and get our new belt in place, put this all back together, and we're on the final stretch. So you can see our coupler is sliding back together there. You can nudge it back into place. I greased up the mounts first so it would slide. And so now we're going to go ahead and bolt our engine back in place. Then we are going to get everything reassembled. So I've got all the motor mounts back in place. Remember to use some medium strength blue thread locker on each of those bolts. This one right here, remember we need a ratcheting wrench to get it in place. So here we have our tensioner assembly. Many of you will be running the stock tensioner. Hopefully if you are running the stock one, you added a Zerk. If not, you know, it's not difficult to take it apart and grease it. I have this part from Cowie Performance. Now Kspeed does not specify, they assume you're going to use the stock tensioner for your installation of their supercharger, pulley, and idler. So for this, I'm going to keep my Cowie Performance part on here just because I do like it's the bearing assembly. It's got no maintenance in it. Alright, so there's our new Kspeed pulley. That's a pretty big pulley. And then here's our stock bolt. Alright, so tensioner pulley bolt. 48 foot-pounds. Okay, so we've got this bolt here torqued, 48 foot-pounds per the shop manual. And now we've got these 4 bolts here. Those are each 26 foot-pounds. We're going to get those in place and set this down on top of the belt. Now normally I don't change it this way. You remove this whole bracket, and we're going to try to do that and see if it makes it easier. That makes it a million times easier. Of course, that one there I can't get. Those have to be torqued still. I'm just tightening them in place. Now each of these bolts we're going to torque to 26 foot-pounds. So everything is torqued to spec. Our belt is back in place. So now we're going to remove our tensioner clip. we need a breaker bar with a 19mm socket, and we're going to pop that tool off of there. I have done this other ways in the past without the tool, so I didn't own this tool. It's a little teeny $7 tool. I couldn't get it. I have it now. You usually get it if you buy a new damper spring, so I obviously haven't bought a new damper spring for $300. So this tool, none of the local dealers could get it for me. They said, oh, we can't order it separately, gave me the runaround. I found it on eBay, brand new, from a company, I think it was Mad Parts with 2 Ds. And it was $7 plus like $6 for shipping, they charged me. And got it in a couple days. And using that tool and removing these 4 bolts and removing the whole sub bracket assembly makes it a lot easier to get the belt back in place. So I was doing it a different way. I'm going to do it this way from now on. If you've watched some of my other videos, you've seen me do it the other way. So if you need to get it done and you don't have the tool, my other videos are how you would do that while holding the tensioner while slipping the belt on with your hand. But this way is by far the easiest. I'm going to release the tension on that spring, removed our tool. So now I'm going to give you a look down here. Our belt is tensioned. So there is our Kspeed 108mm race spec pulley. There is our expanded, our larger Kspeed idler pulley to compensate for the smaller supercharger pulley. Okay, so we've got our throttle body duct back in place. We've got our main supercharger duct back in place. All this is tightened up and good to go. So now we've got our intercooler, these 2 bolts tightened. So our next step is to get our exhaust manifold back in place. Now I'm going to clean up this surface here. We're going to use a flat piece of sandpaper. So I got this surface all prepped here. I used a piece of 500 grit emery cloth. Here's our brand new gasket. If you aren't sure which gasket to use, that is 11061-3762. So let's get that gasket open. That's going to go right there. This is going to go right like that. These are one-time use. It's a metal gasket, so it's a crush gasket, and you know, once it's used, that's it. So you have 4 bolts that go right here. One is shorter, that one's going to go right here. Now you can see I've got some grease on this. Just take note, the grease is not on the threads, it's just on the shaft of the bolt, okay? So you don't want to have anything on just line and make sure that's lined up. You do not want to have grease on the threads, but you can see that there's a little bit of rust on some of these bolts, which means you know, some moisture is getting in there. So I'm just going to grease up the shafts of the bolt so that when they're inside the manifold here, they aren't exposed to any corrosion. So I'm just getting each of these started just so our gasket lines up correctly. And there we go. Those are 12mm. This one is 14. All right, so let's tighten all these and then we're going to torque them. So these 4 right here, this is the shorter one, but it's the same. These all have to be torqued to 26 foot-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and use this Milwaukee just to snug them up. So I'm not torquing them, I'm just tightening them. Save me some time doing it by hand. Then that's our 14 right there. Gotta hit that one. There's a specific sequence. We're gonna start with this. This is bolt A, then these 3, B, and then C, this one right here. So this bolt right here is 33 foot-pounds. We're gonna torque that one first. All right, we are set at 33 foot-pounds. So bolt A, All right, bolt A. So now bolts B, that's these three right here. These bolts right here, we're gonna torque. I'm gonna tighten them all just evenly, but these are all gonna be 26 foot-pounds. All right, so 26 foot-pounds, our wrench is set. All right, so we've got our exhaust all torqued down. We've got our nameplate back in place. We've got our exhaust hose reconnected. Make sure that when you're reconnecting these hoses, you put a little bit of grease on each nipple before you slide those hoses on. So I've got my catch can back in place. Got all three hoses on the catch can. These two 10mm bolts. We've got our supercharger relief valve reconnected to the intercooler, and make sure to reattach this vacuum line from the throttle body spacer to the relief valve. Then do a final audit of all your hose clamps of everything you removed. Make sure all your clips and connectors are connected. If you had to remove any zip ties, make sure that you reconnect all those zip ties and get the wires as neat as possible. And this is a final time just to do a good check of everything. Make sure all your hoses and clamps are tight and in good condition. And we are ready to go. So let's fire her up, and we'll run her on the hose for about 5 minutes. Make sure everything is good. Allow the ECU to adjust to the new pulley, you know, because there's more boost coming through now. I'm sure that a good portion of that is just getting bled off because I have not installed the BOV block off yet. And we are finished. Our brand new supercharger pulley is installed. We've got our Kspeed fuel rail, and we are now good to go. I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you once again to Kspeed for hooking me up with these parts and for offering the best service and support as always. Anytime you need them, shoot them an email, give them a call. They are always more than happy to help and love talking Kawasaki's. Their shipping from Australia to the United States takes 4 days. If you order it, you know, on a Monday, usually you'll get everything by Friday, pending, you know, the customs clearance and everything, but they're incredibly fast with their shipping. Yeah, I'm thrilled to have these parts in my ski and can't wait to get out on the water. Where's my good boy? Where's my good boy? Hi, Coop Coop. Are you a good boy? Sit. Paw. What a nice boy. You such a nice boy.